Hello, Earthbound peeps. My name is Burn Slipcover, and I'll be your host for this week's episode. Wait, did I say my own name wrong again? Odd, right? You'd think if it wasn't for what, where, and how we are today. You see, last time we defeated 2 puppies. Their death resulted in us completing the search for our 8th sanctuaries, and in turn will lead us to a very particular place. A place that is a realm of the mind. Our mind. Ness's mind. This episode, we'll deep dive into the mind of our protagonist and see what lies in the depth of his subconscious when we battle this week's boss, Ness's nightmare. Once we walk through the door guarded by a Carbon Dog and Diamond Dog, we have a bit of a walk up to the Fiery Spring Sanctuary spot. Before we reach the end of the road, make sure Ness has a sea pendant equipped and the Franklin badge in his inventory. Do not equip the Casey bat if you have it. Clear all unnecessary items. Leave magic truffles, brain food lunches, and maybe a bag of Dragonite if you have one. Once your inventory is set, continue upward. Arriving there, you are overcome with feelings. The soundstone recorded the last melody, and the full lullaby begins to play. Suddenly, you are transported into a black and white scene that you've never seen before. Or have we? We watch as a physical representation of Ness climbs a grassy hill. The entire location floats in a background of nothingness, but it seems eerily familiar. As the lullaby continues to play, a familiar house appears in frame. It's our childhood home, though we could have sworn it appears differently in this memory. Reaching the door, the physical appearance of Ness vaporizes. Once inside, the black and white aesthetic begins to make sense as we are greeted by a puppy version of our favorite dog. Surely he wasn't this small when we left home for our journey, right? The lullaby still plays as our spirit drifts through the house and finally settles in what we remember as our bedroom. There in the center is a crib that rocks slowly. While we watch what we now know is Ness as a baby, voices of his parents begin to enter the memory, and we are there for the moment he is given his name, Ness. The room is filled with the encouraging words of his parents' hopes and dreams. They don't want him to be rich or famous, just a thoughtful, strong boy. We get a hint of what a strong boy he will become when he seems to move a bottle with just a point of his finger. It won't be until Ness is 13 years old when everyone will learn what his power destines him to do. The lullaby fades, and so does the black and white, as we find ourselves in a very strange place. The first person we see, represented by Pooh's trainer, gives us the answer we are so desperately needing to know. We've been transported to Magikant, which is a realm of the mind, Ness's mind. I go into a theory that there are countless Magikants, but that's for a different time. The map of Magikant is split into several portions. There's a homestead portion where you find your mother and sister. There's also a surrounding area that appears to be like a giant garden, giving another example of how this world is a representation of real life. There's a couple buildings that you can buy items, save, and get money if needed. The second part, I feel, represents Ness's influence that brought him this far in life. You see some snowmen that reminisce of yesteryear. You find old friends, including Porky, who gives you a more than honest feel of their connection. At the top of the friend and childhood zone, you'll find the flying men, who will be your temporary teammates through the map. You'll be able to employ 5 of them total, and if they die in battle, a tombstone will appear outside of their house, marking their gravesite. They are a great companion, and they can actually use their own video breaking down their significance and their symbolism. Before we move forward on the map of Magikant, I want to go back and go over how the environment reacts to you. Every time you talk to someone, the landscape of Magikant will change colors. It's a pretty nifty effect, so feel free to mess around for a bit before you get down to business. I would highly suggest talking to everyone in Magikant, from Porky to Belch to the Snowmen. They all have their unique dialogues that reach into the backstory of the game and gives it some more weight. I have to keep reminding myself that this series is for the bosses and not every detail, because I just want to talk Earthbound nonstop about everything. Once you're happy with your interactions, head to the Flying Man's house and grab a friend. You're ready to head into the dangerous zones. This part of your Magikant, your mind, that represents turmoil, trouble, hatred, and fear. Going forward now, you'll have a long walk to the boss. There won't be any relief, and you're all alone, aside from the Flying Man, so be smart. Avoid all the battles you can. In this first area, each enemy is represented by a question mark or presence. Each of these have their own erratic travel pattern, so you'll have a higher level of success avoiding them than typical enemies. And since I've mentioned the enemies, it's time for a good breakdown. You'll find the Carefree Bomb, and attacks are explosive. Keep your HP up and use your strongest physical attacks to defuse it. There's the Electro Swoosh. As powerful as its electric attacks may be, it's still nice enough to send a friendly greeting. That's where your Franklin badge will come in handy. There's a French Kiss of Death. Show this creature some modesty, and a Horn of Life may be yours. They have a 2 out of 128 chance of dropping a Horn of Life. Next is the Loaded Dice. Taking your time with this foe may be a gamble because it can call on more powerful allies. And finally, there's the Mr. Molecule. The bonds between its molecules are weak, as are its concentration, PSI usage, and challenge level. These are the ones you hope to find when the question marks attack. There are 2 points at this part where the path forks, and they're right at the beginning. I would suggest taking the time to check them both. The first, you'll find a version of yourself that will give you a baseball cap and will speak to you. And if you know anything about Ness, that dude doesn't talk very much. The other fork will give you the Goddess Band, which increases your luck when equipped. The main path of this section is a spiral that ends as a horn. Again, remember despawn or strategize around avoiding any enemies. And not to spoil the end of the segment, but there is a massive boost of experience at the end of this, so we don't really need to grind. Once you reach the horn, you'll have one more segment before you're out of the water, literally. The horn transports you to the Sea of Eden. Here you will find only one type of enemy, the Krakens. They won't drop any items like earlier, and they're a bit easier to defeat compared to the boss between Summers and Scaraba. There are 3 swimming around. One will be at the end of the straightaway at the beginning, the second will be straight up from there, and the final one will be swimming around the boss pedestal. Avoid them if you can. If you end up fighting them, use physical attacks, keep your HP up, and conserve PP for the upcoming battle. Again, your Franklin badge is clutch. Once you've waded through the mystic water, you'll reach a raised illuminated pedestal with this week's boss at the center of Ness's psyche. Its name says it all. Ness's Nightmare. Right off the bat, you'll recognize the look. It's a Manny statue, right? I have theories based on why it's appeared that way, but I think much like the statue implies, it represents greed and evil, something Ness would have placed as an evil entity in his mind. Heading into this battle, know that it is tricky. Very tricky. Ness's Nightmare can do some heavy damage and can kill you in one hit. Know that prepping is the easiest way to beat him, but don't get discouraged if it takes a time or two. I remember my early rounds, it would take multiple playthroughs to beat. At the beginning of the battle, use the bag of Dragonite that you found. It does a ton of damage. Then use physical attacks. That's the best way to win. Ness's Nightmare has a deadly, glorious light attack, which is actually a form of PSI Flash. As such, you should have some sort of protection against Flash. Night Pendant, Sea Pendant, Star Pendant like we talked about earlier. During the battle, as the manifestation of Ness's evil, essentially part of Ness, the Nightmare's attacks are the same PSI attacks that Ness can use, including variations of PSI Rockin', PSI Life Up, and Shield Beta. Keep your HP up and hit him hard with everything, PSI Rockin' and Bash moves. By this point in the game, Ness already has a large number of hit points, so even if he's mortally wounded, you should have enough time to cast Life Up before your HP meter rolls to 0. So knowing that, here's a strategy that I found in my research. The easiest way to defeat Ness's Nightmare is to be sure that you have 100% flash protection, like we talked about, Night Pendant, Sea Pendant, Star Pendant, and then use Auto Fight. You heard that right, use Auto Fight. Leave the fate of the world up to, well, fate. Whether you try going yourself or let the fates decide, stick with it and you will prevail. As such, when Ness's Nightmare is defeated, Ness destroys all the evil, fears, and doubt that were within him, allowing him to absorb the power of the 8 Your Sanctuary locations. And man, it feels good once you beat this boss, trust me. Now before I leave you for this week, I will give you some trivia to tell your friends. Since the playable characters' names are decided by the player, the name of this enemy reflects the player's name choices. It's only Ness's Nightmare when the main character is called as such, Ness being the default name. You would figure that on yourself. If Omri, for example, it will say Omri's Nightmare. Bada boom, bada bing. When the Eraser Racer is used on the statue outside of battle, a text box will come up saying, it looks like some sort of primitive human statue. If you look at it at the right angle, but it definitely doesn't look like a Eraser, does it? The same speech can be found by using the Eraser Racer on the evil Manny statue in Moonside, although this requires modifying the player's inventory using hacking programs. Similarly, using Pencil Eraser on the evil Manny statue or Ness's Nightmare will result in the speech, do you really think this looks like a pencil? The background visuals for this battle is very similar to the background of the evil Manny battle. Ness's Nightmare is the last of the 5 bosses who has the music Overworldly Foes for its battle theme, the other 4 being Starman Jr., Mr. Carpenter, Evil Manny, and Clumsy Robot. In Mother 2, Ness's Nightmare is actually called something along the lines of Ness's Devil or Ness's Demon. However, Nintendo's American division changed this to Nightmare in order to avoid religious references in the game. And there you have it, another episode down, and that leaves us just one more boss before we part ways for now. But don't cry for me, not now. We're in the end game coming up, and we'll need to have our wits about us. I hope you enjoyed conquering our Nightmare. Next time the real Nightmare begins, the universe's Nightmare, actually, you may have heard his name whispered through the world, or maybe you felt his icy claws scratching your neck in the middle of the night. You are not prepared for the hell and horror ahead of us. But luckily we have a week to breathe before we fight Gygus himself. Thank you for watching the whole video. I'm glad I can call you a friend. If you'd like to catch up with the whole series so far, in anticipation for next week, click the link on the left. And if you'd like to know all about the Manny's connection to the entire storyline and Ness's Nightmare, click on the right. And as always, later days.